in the to our guests here in just a moment. They say they got upset with everything that's happening in Detroit. We'll find out what their solution is, or what they think the solution should be, and their cure for Detroit, coming up here on the Paul W. Smith Show. A couple who say they have the cure for Detroit. A call to remember the self, 7 days to redemption. Dr. Alonzo Fleming and his wife, Cherice Fleming, up next on WJR.
Welcome back to the Paul W. Smith Show on WJR. Hey, next time you're on Facebook, search for Paul W. Smith and like the Paul W. fan page. He won't just like you, he'll love you for it. Now, once again, here's Paul.
I love you. Anyway, you know that. It's a program of love. 7:23 at 760 WJR. 41 degrees, some thunderstorms, a high of 62 for the day. Okay, a lot of people contact Ann, specifically, or me, and then I always say, that's interesting. Call Ann. It's just the way it works. But Dr. Alonzo Fleming and his wife, Cherice Fleming, contacted Ann and sent their book, in effect. And she said, I just got this note from a man and his wife, who are sick and tired of having the Malik Shabazes of the world speak for Detroiters. They say they don't speak for, the Malik Shabazz doesn't speak for Detroiters. This couple lives in the city, and they want the city council to sign the consent agreement. His name is Dr. Alonzo Fleming, has a Ph.D. in physics. Dr. Fleming, welcome to the Paul W. Smith Show at WJR.
Thank you for having me, Paul.
Well, it's our pleasure, and thank you for listening. I'm told you listen all the time, and we appreciate that. And as noted on Cure for Detroit, a call to remember the self, Mama Cherice Fleming is here as well. Cherice, good morning.
Good morning, Paul.
You have a computer science background, but your main interest is your family and loving your family and all of that. And I'm sensing that there's just an overall frustration, Doctor, that you feel that people such as yourself, people that none of us have heard of. I mean, I haven't, but maybe, people have, and friends and all, but you don't have a voice. I'm giving you that voice. I want you to be heard. Give me your take on the city council, consent agreement, emergency manager, and where the city finds itself today.
Well, the first thing I'll start off with, Paul, is that the governor needs to just go ahead and send in the emergency manager, because the problem is not the deck chairs on the Titanic. The problem is the Titanic itself, vis-a-vis the city. The thoughts of the people who are running the city right now, their solution to every problem is a march, a protest, or a riot. And their very basis of thinking is violence and destruction. So you see this violence and destruction everywhere, all over the city. The incompetence is every single place you look, without exception. So it tells you that there's a basis of thought that simply does not work to advance people. The thought system that they are using has to be wiped out. If a consent agreement is good, but it leaves in place the same thinkers, they're going to plant their seeds again, and we can't use them. Our family, we have a family. I have a wife and 3 children, and we cannot thrive or grow under the circumstances of the city as it is. And when you have people like, for example, your city council president suggesting that deadlines are meant to be broken, when you have Shabazz talking about burning down the city, these are not accidental sayings that these people are saying. The very city itself shows you that this is what's in their mind consistently. Breaking deadlines, burning down a city, robbery, rape, murder. This is who you're dealing with in the city of Detroit. So we have to wipe the whole thing clean and start over.
Well, I hear the frustration, and yes, I'm sorry, Cherice, go ahead.
One thing my husband always says, too, is that you cannot solve a problem from the level of the problem. And the bottom line is that we all have to elevate beyond the skin that we're in. One thing that my husband and I both recognize is that Govenor Snyder is coming from a place that's beyond just words. We see good works. And the wise man once said that you could tell a good tree by the fruit it bears. So the works have been good for the city and for Michigan. So our bottom line is, encourage him to go forward, to do the hard work that may not be accepted is good, but you got people who are still living at the level of the skin they're in. But we got to start moving from the heart and trust that the universe will aid us in that which we desire.
Well, a completely different view than the people who are loud or loud-mouthed that show up at these meetings and continue to make anybody from outside of the city of Detroit, and frankly anybody who is white, stepping in makes them or us feel as if we're intruding, or we're trying to pull a fast one, or that we're trying to steal their treasure, or any number of things.
Well, Paul, if I might interrupt, let's be frank. I made a video, a 50-minute video, and it's called Let's Be Honest, Whites Built Detroit. When you hear these people bragging about running the water system for 100 years and doing this, that, and the other for this is ours, we have to recognize that white people built Detroit and invited black people in from the South to help. And our ancestors came up from the South and began to work in the factories. It was an invitation. So when these people haven't built anything, and the proof is in the 40-year period since white fight and the black middle class was driven out of Detroit through the murderers who have taken over the city now. The proof is that they didn't build anything and can't run anything is in what you see right now. Now that we're all coming back into the city, you see building going on and investment going on. These people haven't built anything, and the proof is in that. So when they talk about white people, they need to shut up, because the whites built Detroit and invited us in, and we came in and helped. The only difference is that the murderers took over the city rather than the peacemakers, and these racist murderers, which is what I call them because that's what they produce, that's who's occupying the city right now.
All right, Dr. Alonzo Fleming and your wife, Cherice Fleming, if you would, could you stand by? We have to break for news. I'd like to bring you back on, and frankly, people are responding and reacting to what you're saying and calling in. So can I put you on hold?
Absolutely.
All right, we'll put you on hold for just a moment. These are a couple of regular listeners to the Paul W. Smith Show who have written their work called A Cure for Detroit, a call to remember the self, Dr. Alonzo and Mama Cherice Fleming. And people are responding at 800-859-0957, 800-859-0WJR at 7:30. We're becoming aware of opinions and thoughts from people we don't hear from ever. It just so happens that this couple, obviously very well spoken, and they've written a couple of books, The Devil's Advocate, A Spiritual Man's Case Against God from 2008, Picking the Bible to Pieces, A New Scripture, 2012, and this one is Cure for Detroit, a call to remember the self, 7 days to redemption. Now God is the Spirit, and where the Spirit of God is, there is liberty. Dr. Alonzo Fleming and his wife, Cherice Fleming, and a whole bunch of you calling in that want to speak about what they're talking about. So we'll get to your calls as well. We've got Sports with Steve Courtney coming up, and back to our guests and your calls. Alrighty, Sports with Steve coming up after traffic and weather. Dr. Alonzo Fleming, his wife Cherice Fleming, say they have a cure for Detroit, a call to remember the self. Stopping the violence is extremely important, and people are weighing in on what's being said here. And let's hear what they have to say. You can join us at our WJR toll-free number, 800-859-0957. That's 800-859-0957, and also that works out to being 800-859-0WJR. And let's go to Tom, who is in Detroit and wants to weigh in on what's being said. Tom, good morning.
Good morning, Paul W. How are you?
I'm very good. I hope you're well. Say hi to Dr. Alonzo Fleming and his wife, Cherice.
Well, it's 85 and sunny in my life right now. But that aside, Paul, I've been in this city since 1953. I'm a happy and I'm a young 65 years old.
Okay.
And I remember in 1967 when we had the civil insurrection, the riot, and I never want to see anything like that happen again. And it's people with that kind of mentality that doggone Shabazz want to talk about burning the city down. We don't need anything like that. The city has not recovered along with it from that riot almost 50 years ago.
Yeah, you're right about that.
And it's people like him who keep this city and this region from becoming what it should be, and that is GREAT. And I mean, personally, there are more people in this city, Paul, who don't want to see some kind of mayhem like that created. And I mean, Shabazz, he was the 800-pound gorilla in the room. There was a camera there, and he was playing to that camera. Because I heard him on Frank Beckman, I think it was Friday before last, or whenever it was, and he did not and would not apologize for those statements.
That's a shame. You obviously you're supportive of what Dr. Fleming, Alonzo, and Cherice Fleming have to say here this morning, and say hi to them. They're here.
Yes. Good morning, Mr. and Mrs. Fleming, Dr. and Mrs. Fleming. Like I said, I've been here since 1953, and I mean I'm a big supporter of this city. And I mean, I do what little bit I can, because I remember a commercial that used to come on television. It said it's the little things that mean a lot. And if enough of us did a little bit, a whole lot could be done in terms of what this city could be.
Well, you know what you're representing, Tom, and for that matter, Dr. Alonzo and Cherice Fleming. It was Andy Dillon, our state treasurer, who's been on often, who said, there are about 20 loudmouths that show up at these meetings, right. But I believe that there's a silent majority in Detroit that doesn't feel the way these loudmouths feel, and you guys are proving that there's certainly people out there who absolutely are in disagreement with all of the negative stuff.
You're Let me say this real quickly. Shabazz is just the head of the snake. You haven't. This represents. He's just the mouthpiece of a whole group of them, Joanne Watson and all of them. He's just the mouthpiece of them. But I don't want to be misconstrued I don't want my words to be misconstrued into people thinking that I'm suggesting that when I said earlier before the break that black people don't build anything. That's simply not true. I'm simply saying the mind represented by the Joanne Watsons, the Malik Shabazzes, that have taken over the city, have murdered and slaughtered and chased the best thinkers, the best minds, the innovators out of the city, black and white or whatever. And so you only hear them.
No, you know what? Tom is still here, and he is all of those things. And besides that, Tom, you also have displayed in a very short period of time a very bright, upbeat, positive attitude. Now, I got to let you go, Tom.
Okay, I'm at school because I'm getting ready to go in.
All right, I appreciate. I hope you're a teacher and affecting lots of other minds, and we appreciate that. There are a lot more good teachers than bad. Thank you for listening, Tom, and calling in. And I'm going to ask you, Dr. Fleming and Cherice Fleming, to stand by. A lot of people want to talk to you and hear what you have to say, and they agree or disagree with you. At 7:45, we take care of traffic on the quarter hours. John?
Still a dry setting in the metro region, but just to our west of Jackson and 127, a broader area of showers and a few embedded thunderstorms reach into the southwest sections of the state up towards the Grand Rapids area, all moving in an easterly direction. So a thickening cloud pattern will continue for another hour or so, and we will be seeing some showers and thunderstorms by mid-morning between 9 and 10 o'clock. I think they'll be moving into the western areas. High temperatures for the day, 60 to 62, and I think the showers will be pretty much clear in the area early on in the afternoon. Showers end completely tonight, morning clearing, low of 40. Wednesday and Thursday with sunshine both days, sunny to partly sunny, slightly lower temperatures with the north wind. Highs for tomorrow and Thursday, 55, 57. At the top of the hour, we had partly to mostly cloudy skies, virtually calm winds. The temperature was 41 degrees. The next update in the 8 o'clock newscast.
Published by Lulu, care of Crescendo Publishing. Is this something they can easily get a hold of?
Sure. If they go to www.cure4detroit.info, we basically produce the book through a publisher called Lulu, though we have our own publishing company. It's just that with the economic decline, our finances have not been what they once were. So we began using Lulu. Can I give a brief plug on the book, Paul? Is that okay?
Of course. I thought this whole thing was really kind of a plug for the book, really.
Okay. Well, basically, My husband and I, we had he's a fourth generation Detroiter and I'm a second generation, and we had left for about 4 or 5 years to go to college in California. What we noticed when we were in college, because we got married in Las Vegas, we just kind of traveled around, is that we were very violent. It was that mind we took with us growing up in Detroit, in the environment that we grew up in, made us very angry type people, and that violence then became demonstrated in our marriage. And had we not opened up ourselves to the science that he was learning and to the spirituality on a higher level than just, and I don't want to sound sacrilegious when you hear about the book, Picking the Bible to Pieces. What we did was we pulled the principles from the book, and we had to come to a place where we realized that it's the essence of the human spirit that's divine. We honor books beyond the human essence, and so we'll carry a book or go crazy over a burning of a book, but murder each other wholesale. And so this is where we come from. We realize that we carry the divine, the word in us, and that's what needs to be discovered. So when we wrote The Cure for Detroit, it was because we had come upon understanding of principles pulled both from science and spirituality that healed our marriage and healed other marriages. As we were going through college, we began to deal with couples of diverse backgrounds, and we would have these meetings, and we just kind of have these sit-down barbecues and talk about marriage and apply these principles, and they worked. We didn't know that when we got back to Detroit what we would find, that it was continuing to sink down the toilet, and that's exactly what was happening. But we were disappointed. We have a lot of property there. We have a lot of family there. And we just began to think about how can we go about bringing about some things that would be instrumental in bringing healing to the city. My husband first wrote the book, The Devil's Advocate, because it's over 10,000 churches in Detroit, but none of them seem to have any solutions. They're actually all fighting with each other. And it keeps the violence going. So the Cure for Detroit is something that's been tried and true.
This would be... how do people react when you say there are 10,000 churches in Detroit, but they're not helping anybody because they're all fighting each other? How do people react to that?
The fact, because you're scientists, and the one thing that scientists are groomed to do is become dispassionate about facts. We just simply accept the facts and then go about finding experiments and trying to solve a problem if we want to solve a problem or do our reports or whatever. So the facts are that there are 10,000 churches, and the facts are that there's the murder, the bloodbath is up to the horse's bridle in the city of Detroit, and those are just the simple facts. So how they react is the same way they react when you tell them that they are unimaginative, not innovative. You just have to come to the conclusion that you have to, before you can solve a problem, you have to admit that the problem is there, and then look for innovative ways to solve it. You can't just keep denying and then sidestepping the problem, and then because sooner or later you're going to run out of time, which is what the city has done.
Can you stick around a little longer?
Sure, yes, we can.
All right, we'd like that, I think, very much. A couple of folks who've contacted Ann said they're listeners. They have, I guess they're the silent majority that Andy Dillon was hoping was out there. And boy, we're finding that at least there are a lot of people out there that feel the same way. Of Dr. Alonzo Fleming, his wife Cherice Fleming. They've written Cure for Detroit, a call to remember the self, 7 days to redemption. Back to them and you and your calls on the Paul W. Smith Show, WJR Detroit. As those involved argue and courts get in the middle and nobody knows what's going to happen, Thursday is supposed to be the deadline. Is it really? It should be. It better be. There are people who live in the city of Detroit who say, wait a second, we are no longer going to be the silent majority. We want to be heard, and we're glad that they're listening to the Paul W. Smith Show on WJR, and that includes Dr. Alonzo Fleming, his wife Cherice Fleming, who contacted us and said, look, we don't believe that a guy like Malik Shabazz speaks for us or speaks for Detroiters, and they want their word out, and they've written Cure for Detroit, a call to remember the self, 7 days to redemption. which you can find at curefordetroit.info. And they're with us, and we're taking some calls. Let's get to the calls and see what your reaction is to what's being talked about. And we go to Tim in Saline, and the number, by the way, 800-859-0957. That's 800-859-0WJR. Tim.
Yeah, hi, Paul.
Hi.
Great show.
Thanks.
Thank you to your guests. I think maybe since the 60s or 70s, the programs that have been put forth to help people in places like Detroit, I think have just backfired on the social fabric of the city and other places. And also, I think all that time, Hollywood has been kind of a culprit in, playing people a certain way, playing minorities in a certain way. I think the end result then is just a lot of anger, and people, make their political careers on, playing off that anger. And I think your guests are, just showing a little more reality and I think really helping the situation more than anybody I can think of.
Well, it sounds like that. Now, a lot of that could be because, we kind of agree with what they're saying, and they can say it in a way that we can't say it. I mean, let's be totally upfront and honest and put it all on the table here.
Yep, I agree with you.
And
I can't imagine being a kid in Detroit, growing up with, in a situation where there's not a lot of hope, I guess,
Well,
I can cut in on this. You pointed it out, Paul, things that you can't say. It just goes to show that there's no real conversation between us. There's just a lot of hyperbole between us, and there needs to be a real conversation. And this is where the division is coming in from. Cherice and I are not talking like we're talking in a vacuum. We both grew up, born, bred, and raised in Detroit. I'm a fourth-generation Detroiter. From the time I can remember, murder and slaughter has been going on. I can recount so many murders and slaughter of friends from before I was 15. Over 20 people murdered. My father was savagely murdered in his home. My cousin shot dead in front of his pregnant wife and children. Murder after murder after murder, and the conversation is the white man is doing all this. And I'm just really, really fed up with the white man dressing up as black people and killing them.
Alonzo, as I said, you can say it, I cannot. And there's the problem. Low
down white man, how he's doing all this, how incompetent he is on the city council, how incompetent the white man is in religion, how incompetent this dirty, no good white man is all over the city of Detroit doing all this damage, murder, and mayhem. I'm just really tired of the white man.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay.
And
you understand what I'm saying?
I fully understand what you're saying. And it kind of goes back to what we started Sunday on Flashpoint, Channel 4 with Devin Skillian. It is a conversation that needs to take place. But a lot of people say, well, wait a minute, we've been talking about this for a very long time. But there's a lot of hesitation, and people can't say, for example, what you just said as a white person, because then we are thought of as a racist.
Because the race baiters, the race players, they don't thrive on knowledge. They thrive on ignorance. And so the only way they can keep ignorance predominant is by suppressing conversation. See, you could say that to me.
I'm going to let Cherice say something, because I know sometimes it's hard for the female to get a voice in when there are a couple of loud guys.
Well, I was just thinking, and it keeps us all, Paul, from truly healing and making Michigan, Detroit a better place, and the world a better place, because we only can talk about this quietly at our dinner tables. My husband and I and we put it in the video we made, Let's Be Honest, Why People Built Detroit, about how don't call me young, because this is their mantra in many cases, all these single propped up leaders in the city of Detroit. None of them are married, have marriages, sound marriages. If they have one, it's usually just for face value. But let me say this, and that says a lot in itself. But the fact of the matter is, that we got to recognize that these things like Coleman Young, they like to say this mantra, Coleman Young did this and we need to stick with Coleman Young. Coleman Young loved black Detroit. He wanted to see a black Detroit. But Coleman Young came in under a violent mind. And the fact of the matter is he opened the door for all the violent minds to come in and take over the city. These violent minds in the skin that I'm in ran out all of us who were building that, my fathers who had owned businesses and thought that, and you had the white people saying last one out, could turn off the lights. And that's exactly what happened. The lights out. So,
as Stephen Henderson so eloquently said.
Very eloquently said. And you're not hearing a bunch of arguments on the other side here, and our phone lines are open to anyone who wants to weigh in. Tim from Saline, I appreciate your call. Let's go to Eric in Armada. You're on WJR. Hello, Eric.
Hey, Paul. Love your conversation. Just 2 points I'd like to bring up. One, I think everybody recognizes the reverse racism that seems to be going on across the nation, with what went on in Florida and so forth. But I think for Detroit, and what they really need to do is unload the baggage, the unused properties, all the blight, and just basically auction it off under the pretense that if you don't, and set up a contract that if you buy it, you have to develop it within a certain time frame, and otherwise don't buy it. You might be able to afford. Yeah, it goes on auction. You pay $100. You bought the property, but you better develop it. You better do something with it. Otherwise, if you don't do anything, the city takes it back and auctions it off again. Because eventually, it will be rebuilt. But the question is, how quickly can we do it? And I would live in Detroit. I would live in any city. But the fact is that there's just too much blight, and it's a lot more comfortable where I live. So I appreciate you letting me in on this.
Yeah, Eric, I'm glad you felt comfortable about joining in on this, and love to hear a quick reaction from our guests, Dr. Alonzo.
Well, I would comment on that.
Yeah.
The blight, I agree with him, but the blight is a reflection of the inner man. See, what my husband and I realize is that the hearts have to be cleansed, and we have to deal with our hearts. When we were, and I don't want to, I know we all have our certain political leanings, but let me use politics as an example. When we were in Las Vegas, we had a tutoring center, and most of the students we catered to were Asian and German and white. And the fact of the matter is, at that time, Obama was running for president. We had decided, after listening to him, that we were voting at that time I wanted Ralph Nader, and I think my husband wanted, it was a Republican. Ron Paul at that time?
Paul. Yeah.
Okay. Now, we decided that this was in our heart. Now, most of our black families and everything, they were going for Obama because he was black. We needed to really run for this black president. But because my husband and I have developed ourselves to the point where, though we have an appreciation for the skin we're in, we don't do everything based on that. We voted our hearts. After Obama was elected,
you have an appreciation. I want to wait a minute. These go by very quickly. We have an appreciation for the skin we're in, but we don't do everything based on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that.
And unlike, you hear a lot of people say, they're colorblind. I'm not colorblind. I actually get to know people. I like to know my friends. When I was in college, I wanted to know, things about their culture. I don't desire this colorblind society. I desire a society that appreciates the various cultures and respects each other based on it. Mm-hmm. But anyway, when Obama was hired, became president, all of our patrons came in, parents, assuming we had voted for him. They congratulating us. And we were so tickled because, it was like our private secret. We did not vote for this man, but okay. Thank you.
They congratulated you on a black president because you're black.
Exactly.
We didn't vote for President Obama, though we love him and his family. We knew going in that the policies that were probably going to come out of it was not going to be conducive to what we wanted to see in the society. But our customers, the parents, they said, Dr. Fleming, congratulations, and I was like, oh, what? President Obama. And it just tickled us because we didn't vote for the guy, but we didn't have the heart to tell him that we didn't vote for him.
Funny. I'm glad you spoke up, Dr. Alonzo Fleming, because once I opened the door for Cherice, I didn't think we'd hear from you again. I heard you were like second it. I could hear you in the back. That's right. No, I wanted Ron Paul. I mean, you were there, but we couldn't hear you. And that's okay. Let's go to
Paul. We wrote the governor about a month ago and asked him. And I'm not taking credit for this. I don't know if he read the letter or not. But we wrote the governor and asked him, why don't you call out the younger people, the more professional people who don't get a voice, and let's get in a room and let's hammer out some ideas that we can all use. And lo and behold, he came out with this pizza idea. And it's exactly what we want. We want to get in the room and hammer out ideas and let the best ideas come forth as the top. And those who have those ideas, let them be the guiding people, if you will.
All right, let's get some ideas from our other WJR listeners. Whoops, my screen just went completely black. There it is again. Walter in Sterling Heights, you're on WJR. Walter, turn your radio down. You're hearing a delay.
Walter.
Okay, I'm going to put Walter on hold and go to Kevin in East Point on WJR. Hello, Kevin.
Hey, yes, how you doing, Paul?
Good, thank you. I hope you're well.
Yes, first I want to elect you as being the next president. I listen to you all the time while I'm traveling.
Thank you, Kevin.
But my biggest point is I'm very adamant of what Mr. Fleming just said about putting some people in the room and let them come up with the best ideals, because I've written the governor myself, and I'm telling you, I am very impressed for the first time of a Republican governor. He is really making steps towards changing the status quo.
Right.
And saying that, now Detroit is dealing with a very unique problem. I was a police officer in Detroit for many years, and blacks have come to a point where they got complacent in their jobs. And when I say black, I'm talking about from the senators, the congressmen. I mean, there's so many I can really name. But, to do an effective job, we need, your help, my help. I said Ron Fleming, but that's not the Ron Fleming you were talking to.
Right. Alonzo and Cherice Fleming, yeah, and
right.
Others, yeah.
Now, in doing that, we all have to sit down and come to this mediation, because I tell you, I really hate when people say he's racist because he's a white guy and says, this is not right for Detroit or this is not right for Detroit. Yeah. I come up in a time when, there was only one lock on the door, like you made the statement when the thing happened in Grosse Pointe. That guy at that restaurant was really adamant about, it's a safe community. Detroit used to be like that. But until our voices get heard as,
right.
Because some of the people on the city council is really not our voices. And I like to make that known, they don't speak for people who really know Detroit.
Well,
let me just say something real quick, and I don't think we're going to solve this today, but boy, we're going a long way, Alonzo, Cherice, and you, Kevin, and our other callers and listeners here on WJR. Here's a big, tough thing. For the longest time, people have referred to black leaders, and they'd say, Jesse Jackson, a black leader, or Al Sharpton, a black leader. And that's just wrong. I mean, they don't do that with white people. When a white guy steps up and says something, or is a rabble-rouser at an event, or says stupid things, or is doing things just to benefit themselves, nobody stands up and refers to them as a white leader.
Exactly.
And I think it would go a long way if we could try to avoid that, because I'm not certain that all black people have elected anyone to speak on all of their behalves.
Right, because we're God's people.
I wanted to say that though there are some of the people on the city council that I do agree with. The fact of the matter is the whole foundation has to be wiped out. None of them can be left. The entire system is corrupt and rotten from top to bottom. It has to be moved out before the cure, and then once it's moved out, the cure can be implemented to heal, because the people need to be healed. If they're not healed from the murder disease, which we call this, then you will get the same thing. But if you leave a few of them there who are unhealed on that city council, within the governmental structure, the governor has to wipe the whole thing out. Bottom line.
Let me. He can't even get things done now without court cases and lawsuits and everything else. He's never going to be able to do that. It's going to be up to the people.
They won't work. See, they don't know what it means to have to live off of selling a good product. They don't know what it means to have to meet a payroll based on your own production. They see money in a bank account coming from people they have taken the money from, and they just spend.
All right.
So as a result, the realities are different.
Kevin, thanks for your call there in East Point. And Joe in Bloomfield Township on the Paul W. Smith Show with our guests, Dr. Alonzo and Cherice Fleming. Joe.
Good morning, you guys. How you doing?
Good, thanks.
Good morning.
You know, I'm on I-75. I've been listening to you guys for about an hour and a half. I'm headed down in Ohio. I grew up in the city of Detroit, and I've lived in Dayton, Ohio, and Phoenix, and Troy, and Royal Oak, and now I live in Bloomfield Township. And I just have to, I want to call and make a couple of comments. But first of all, I want to commend you for your outspoken and contrarian point of view from what we normally hear from the black community in the city of Detroit. And I think it's really important because, for whatever reason, recently on this specific issue, the outspoken one from the council usually seems to be Kwame Kenyatta. And Kwame Kenyatta is on the radio, he's in the news media, he's on the television, he's in the newspaper with all these comments about, as you described, the white man, in this instance, the governor, who happens to be a white man, that is picking on the city or...
Slave master. All I have to say is the one line he said, and it sums it up, the slave-master relationship.
But that presumes that he's a slave. So you have to understand, when they use that term slave-master, they are presuming themselves as slaves. So a slave thinks a certain way. So see, we're not slaves. So we don't discuss this in terms of master-slave relationship. We discuss this in terms of men, equal men, sitting down at a table, looking each other in the eye, presenting a plan that's healthy for all of our families. But this master-slave relationship tells you that the governor is dealing with slaves or people who think that they're slaves.
Yeah, we call it slave politics because they used to burn the cotton fields when they were upset with what the master of the plantation was doing.
And that's what a lot of white people don't know. A lot of white people don't know the slave politics because a lot of the history has not been passed down to you either. So you don't know that when someone stands up, see, the slave don't own anything, so he'll burn it down. He'll say that very easily because they did that on the plantation.
Well, you know what occurs to me too. You know what? You know what occurs to me, guys. If you really have that mentality and that thought process, the slave-master relationship, and as you just put it very, very well, Alonzo, that means that he thinks of himself as a slave. And you know, there's a great deal of comfort in blaming the master, and you're just the slave. So what can you do about it? And so,
talking about $230 million. Give us our morsel of fat back in our pot. You're broke,
and that's how they need to go, Paul. That's exactly why we're saying that the governor needs to send in what I call a cleaner, the financial manager, and clean it. Just clean it, you know, and deal with the fallout and the court cases later, you know.
You guys, I didn't mean to spark that particular debate. What I was trying to bring up was the fact that Kwame Kenyatta, I recall not long ago, had a problem with his own finances where his own home was foreclosed on in the city of Detroit. And I think this is indicative of what you had to say earlier about the whole council needs to be cleansed We need to get away from what I think has been a legacy that goes back many, many, many years. You can go back all the way to the chief of police, Mr. Hart. You can go back to Coleman Young's administration. You can go all the way back to Roman Gribbs if you'd like to, and see mismanagement of the finances of the city of Detroit for a very, very long time.
Sure. Yeah, this is not a short term.
Right, to focus on, the whole thing, the type of thing that Kwame Kenyatta brings up, and unfortunately, the what just came up now in our conversation ends up getting people off track. What we got to focus on is getting the city back on track. Don't talk about the churches. Don't talk about the comments that are made that are all distractions from the issue. The issue is we got to focus on the city, the finances, and the services of the city of the people.
Well, and it's very natural and normal and happens all the time that people want to assign blame. I think a great lesson from our governor is he doesn't want to look back and blame people who got the state, for example, into the position the state was in. He wants to look forward and figure out a way to fix it. And we need to do that in the city. We need to do it in our own lives. We can't just keep looking back and saying, well, if had this not happened, and I find myself doing it. It's easy to blame. It does nothing to help the problem. And so we can't keep looking back. Now, I don't know if Councilman Kenyatta had problems with his house. I know that the president, Charles Pugh, did, but he left a better paying job to try to serve the people. These are personal tragedies, and I feel bad for them. So that aside, we do need to work together. We need to be able to have conversation without fear. And that's, frankly, that's mostly for fellow Caucasians. And we need to continue the conversation going and look forward to fixing rather than always looking back and blaming. There's plenty of blame to go around over the last several decades in
Paul,
Detroit.
I would just add, though, that it's very important that, your caller understands that we must deal with issues of the heart as well. When we think about that 911 call in Detroit that happened a year or two ago, where the young girl is crying, and she's saying, you promised you would help me. I felt like she was talking to me personally. And the callousness of this 911 operator, it's a heart matter. You can work on services, you can deal with money, but when the heart is dead and callous, you are going to have problems.
We've got conversation going. I think you're right about all that, Cherice. And Dr. Alonzo Fleming, A Cure for Detroit, a call to remember the self. curefordetroit.info for more information. Back to your calls here on the Paul W. Smith Show. I think we're making some headway here and accomplishing something here at 8:44 on this. You go to curefordetroit.info. On the paperwork that I have for the two of you, it's listed by Dr. Alonzo and Mama Cherice Fleming. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've hesitated calling you Mama Cherice. Now, look, Joanne Watson, City Councilwoman Joanne Watson, wanted us to call her. She loved it that somewhere along the way, she was referred to as Mama Watson. We called her Mama Watson. Can you explain this a little bit to me?
Yeah, for me, it is because, to me, the mother is the nurturer of civilization. In Swahili, Mama, it has a high title. I don't even spell it the same way as in Swahili. I like the M-O because that is how my sons refer to me. And it's a part of appreciating our culture. So when we say we appreciate the skin we're in, but we don't make all our decisions based on that, we understand that there are principles of, that make a society great. And one is honoring the mother. That's why I don't necessarily want to come from the standpoint of my degree, though my husband, I believe, is a natural scientist and doctor, so I call him doctor. But I come from the standpoint of my leaning. My leaning is I'm a nurturer. Naturally, I love children. I love, when we had our tutoring center in Las Vegas, working with the young people. That's who I am. So Mama just is comfortable. You can call me Cherice. That's fine. I'm not a mama to everybody, but that's what I prefer to use as my title. And since my husband has a title, I want one too.
Well, yeah, why not? All right, and I'm going to, and Alonzo,
yes, sir.
I'm going to do something very unusual. I'm going to give you the last word here. because I know what's going on here, and I think it's wonderful the way the two of you get along, and I'm glad that this curefordetroit.info helped your relationship, your marriage, as well as what you believe will help the city of Detroit. We only have 2 minutes, less than 2 minutes left, so I wanted to give you the final word.
Thanks for having us, Paul.
Well, we're very happy to have you on.
I wanted to say, let's look at it in terms of symbols. The symbol of the city of Detroit is a statue in front of the Coleman A. Young building that says, "Now the Lord is that Spirit, and where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty." Think about the mind of the people who put that there. Then at the foot of Woodward, there's another symbol, a fist of Joe Louis. These two things symbolize the mind of those who were running the city. At the foot of Woodward, you have the mind of those who only want to fight. No matter what, they want to fight. But if you notice, they stand in front of the symbol of peace, which is the Coleman A. Young building statue. So I want to point out that we represent what would have naturally grown out of that symbol of liberty and peace, which is why I love Ron Paul. Because, did I plug him in?
Yes, and we got to go. You got your plug in there, and that's good. Look, I just want to say, it makes us feel good. I know Ann feels this way, Brian too. We get up very early in the morning, Brian the earliest, and it makes us feel good when we hear people like yourself are out there that we don't hear from very often, and a side and a way of thinking that we don't hear from, but are happy it's there. So thank you for everything you have done and bring to us. I know you appreciate us, but you tune in, but we appreciate you, and we got to go.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Alonzo Fleming, his wife, Cherice, Mama Cherice Fleming.